to that festival that I'm going to be playing in July. And he reached out to me a few months ago. He was like, well, I listened to your concert and I would very much like to invite you, and how I feel about it. And yeah.
How excited were you when you learned about that?
Very excited. But I think that's just natural, and you learn how to deal with it.
Right. And I noticed that you perform in quite a few places. Hamburg is a place that you've performed, Southampton, London. You let me know that you're going to be playing in Spain later this year. Do you have a favorite place that you like to visit when you're performing?
Favorite place? Well, favorite place isn't necessarily equal favorite performing place, because obviously favorite place often for me is the sea and warm countries, but that's not necessarily the places where you want to be performing, because just being by the sea or hot countries are really stressful, like to go to as a string player, because of the way that your instrument reacts to the climate change.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. And I've noticed that a lot, because I play on a really old violin, and the older they are, the more sensible to it.
Right, you play on the Jacob Steiner 1675 violin, correct?
Yeah, it's old.
How did you choose that one?
Well, I was very lucky that I found someone who was interested in sort of, they found me or however, in making an investment and acquiring that instrument through the Beers Violin Society. And yeah, when I knew that I was going to be able to choose an instrument with these sponsors, I went to Beers, which is like one of the main dealers worldwide for instruments. And they just put a few instruments on the table. And the very first time that I went to them, that Steiner violin was there already. And then I took it home, played on it for a few weeks, and I was completely in love with it. But, you know, I think when you go and look for violins, you don't necessarily want to take the very first one that you liked, because you're like, okay, maybe something better is going to come around the corner. Or I just had that mindset, no, it couldn't have been that easy. So I took a few more weeks to think about it, but then in the end, yeah, we decided for that one.
So this is going to show just how little I know about violins, but what does it mean that it's a 1675? Is it a model that's remade and it's based off of a 1675 violin?
No, it's just the year in which it is dated to. No, it is the year, to be very precise. It is the year that Steiner wrote on the label that is inside the violin. But the people from Beers actually, they dated it to another year, and I don't quite know which one it is now, but they have means of like looking at the wood and looking at the how do you say that, like the pattern of the wood, to date it back to a specific year, like in a range of 400 years ago. So they're using incredible technique to date an instrument to a really specific time. So yeah, 1675 in that aspect doesn't mean anything else other than that's the year that Steiner dated it to.
Okay. Well, now I know that. Thank you very much. So you play in orchestras, obviously, but do you work on any solo music? Have you released any of your own music on streaming platforms? And if not, is that something that you might plan to do in the future?
I don't actually play in orchestras that much at the moment. So most things that I do are either solo concerts or like chamber music things, a pianist or a smaller ensemble. Yeah, I recently recorded something in Germany, which was, I think, one of my first like bigger recordings, or I don't want to say it was like that big, but I was part of a CD, which Sony New Classical, or I always get it wrong. Sony New Sound of Classical. They have this project, and they are recording a CD at the moment, and I was part of it. So that's going to be released soon, I think, and I'm very excited about it.
Do we have a set date, or maybe a?
I don't know. I just know, like, I was involved in one piece, and that happened like 2 weeks ago, and now I'm just waiting, I think.
That's exciting.
Yeah, many more people involved in this project, so yeah, it's not up to me.
We'll have to keep our eyes open for that.
Yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit about the followers that you have on Instagram, particularly because Open Mic is an app that's going to help artists grow a following. So I always like to ask artists that have amassed a pretty good size online following what they think the key to their success has been in doing that. So how do you think that you've grown so many followers on Instagram? What's your secret?
My secret? I think the first and most important thing is maybe the consistency. I try to post every single day. Sometimes that's really annoying because sometimes you just don't have the time for it, and sometimes you're like with friends or family, and then you got to be like, well, I need 5 minutes. I need to do my Instagram post because now my best time on Instagram, like engagement wise. And so that's definitely a thing, consistency. But then obviously I notice how well or how badly different content is perceived. So what I notice, what my followers like a lot, is literally everything about the violin. Like, I think many of them are violinists themselves, some professionals, some students, and some just amateurs. But so they like tips. How do you do this? How can you do that? How do you approach that problem? How do you deal with this? And those kind of posts always, I don't know, I just think they're being liked a lot because people, they're actually useful to people.
You know who your followers are essentially, and what they're looking for in your posts.
Exactly. So they're not really looking for, I don't know, sometimes I do that because, you know, there's this thing called Instagram algorithm. So if you just like go dead for a few days, you're out basically, and it takes a lot of time to build up that and then it's really, really annoying. So to fight that, some days I will just post like non-violent related things when I'm like traveling and I see some nice things, because I like to take pictures as well. I might just like post a few pictures of where I was at that moment. And but I really try and keep it as violin focused as possible, because I know that this is essentially what people are interested in the most.
I'm going to backtrack a little bit. I like to talk about how a musician got started playing a particular instrument, because I think talking about your journey, how you decided on that instrument, can teach a lot of people that maybe haven't gotten involved in music yet. They can learn from your passion, maybe find an instrument that they enjoy playing themselves. So how did you get started?
Well, my parents, they took me to a chorus at a local conservatoire when I was like, I think 5 or 6 years old. And at that chorus, I would have a different instrument for every week. So I think the first week, I happened to start with the violin, I think. But like then the second week, I had the cello and I had the accordion and the double bass and the guitar and the flute. So each week, I would take a different instrument home. And I stuck with a violin. And because I think I just liked it from the beginning a lot. And then just, stuck with it.
Do you still play other instruments too, or just the violin?
No, just the violin. I used to play the piano quite a bit, but never on a level that I was capable of really expressing what I wanted to express musically. So that was sort of frustrating. Because obviously when you're like quite high level with one instrument and then you have another one and you want to express the same things and sort of play on the same level, but obviously that doesn't work if you just haven't had like the lessons and the practice and
right. Do you, when you play with other instruments, is it a good thing to have somewhat of an understanding of those other instruments when you're playing with them?
Oh yes, certainly. That's completely necessary. And I think a good question as well, because obviously like when you play with piano, you need to know sort of how the beginning of a note sounds, how a pianist can't have any influence on how the note evolves. Like they just press a key. They're going to hate me for that. They're just going to press a key and then the sound is there, and then it normally goes away, it fades. But for example, if you play with a woodwind player, for example, they can form the sound just as we do. Or if you play with a singer, then things might speak later, and so you have to adjust to whatever you're playing with.
Johanna, well, best of luck with your master's program at the Royal Academy of Music, and we'll be keeping our eyes open for what you're going to be releasing in the future.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And yeah, I'm planning on like releasing a series of videos on my Instagram, which are like all directed towards violin practice, student life and stuff. So yeah, watch out for that.
And that's it, folks. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the podcast. If you are an artist and would like to have a chance to be on the Open Mic App podcast, all you simply have to do is go to www.theopenmicapp.com/podcast. Again, if you weren't listening, that's www.theopenmicapp.com/podcast. I hope to see you there. Peace.